Welcome to TechieCastJax, where the top technology and business experts around discuss the latest trends in high tech. This podcast is hosted by Joe Holbrook, who's an experienced technologist pundit in Jacksonville, Florida.
Hello, fellow techies. This video has been sponsored by the Linux Foundation. If you really want to be challenged and you want to get certified and prove your worth in Kubernetes, then the Certified Kubernetes Administrator exam is for you. What is really nice is that this is an online proctored exam, and also you get to take the exam twice if you don't pass it the first time. It's a totally command line based exam. This will prove to your prospective employers or current employer or customers, whatever your situation is, that you know Kubernetes. This is the exam to take. Please click the link below and help support the channel. With that said, go ahead and click the link and get the best deal available for the Certified Kubernetes Administrator exam.
Hello and welcome to TechieCastJax. I'm Joe Holbrook. Let's go ahead and talk about a subject that unfortunately tech workers really need to start dealing with, and that is going to be around layoffs. Layoffs are unfortunately going to be a part of your life, whether you like it or not. We've been spoiled in technology for pretty much 20 plus years. And I think, with the current conditions and looking at the current scenarios, this is really starting to pump up to be more on the scale of the 2000 tech sector bubble, and probably a little bit greater in some respects, and I'll explain why. First, I'd like to just start out by talking about Accenture. Now, Accenture, we know, is a global company. They're a company that, of course, has offices all over the world. They really, I guess the way to look at it, is to think about it from a perspective that they depend on consulting and providing consulting to companies. So they have what's called consulting pipelines. These consulting pipelines are definitely slowing down. If you go to the layoff.com and other sites similar to that, they're pretty much describing pretty much what is really going on with Accenture. Basically, it's pretty much public information that they're going to lay off probably about 25,000 people, which I think is probably on the low side based on some of the activity that you're seeing. Deloitte is also another consulting company that is cutting by the thousands as well. But I wanted to point out when it comes to, for example, Accenture, generally they like to say they're cutting the low performers. I find that amusing, and I've never really been affiliated with Accenture. I think I worked 1 gig for them as a contractor probably, I think, about 18, 20 years ago, right after the dot-com bust. And so I don't really have anything for them or against them, just that they're one of the larger targets right now to talk about. So Accenture, they love to apparently lay off people they say are low performers. Now, again, low performers could mean anything. So basically what they typically try to do is they try to lay off, of course, the people that cost them more money first, and then the cheaper people they're going to keep. So what does that mean? That means if you're an American or in England or something, you're going to probably be a bigger target than someone that's in India or even other countries such as perhaps Australia or New Zealand. Now, as far as Accenture, Deloitte, again, they all act similarly, and they're similar to IBM as well in some of their behavior, I think. And again, low performers to be laid off, right? They're going to target 25,000 low performers. And again, that's sort of funny. They are going to lay off in India as well. So they're not just targeting Americans or anything, but I think we're going to see a greater weight, of course, in Americas as we saw back, 18 years ago or 20 years ago, I would say, after the dot-com bust. Now, Accenture is of course a very large company. So 25,000 of their 300,000 plus employees, I think, is the last number that I saw. They have like 40,000 in the U.S., whatever that is. Again, no surprise there that 25,000 is still, a small number percentage-wise. Now, when it comes to Deloitte, Deloitte Canada is, of course, laying off. And I'm going to get into some tech companies such as Twitter, LinkedIn, Salesforce, of course, here pretty shortly. But I want to talk about the big targets first. Now, with Deloitte, for example, they're going to be basically pushing their layoffs. The cuts in progress are about 5% across the board is pretty much what we're seeing in the Deloitte US count. Also, too, a lot of it does come down to your salary and benefits. They're also asking people to take vacation time, apparently, and they're modifying workloads. So some folks are, of course, getting their pay cut and benefits at least kept the same. It's similar to what the airline industry does, where it's like a furlough pretty much. But unfortunately, some business units, from what I've been told and also what you read, are seeing up to an 80% basically reduced work schedule, which is very significant. It's huge. Deloitte Canada, of course, is laying off a few hundred, 400 or 500, I understand. Those numbers seem to go between 400 and 500. The utilization rate, of course, drops as well. Some folks are saying it's below 50%, which is like a death knell. Generally, the utilization rate overall should be well above 70. 71 to 75 is at a minimal. But anyways, that's more consulting jargon. But let's talk about technology layoffs. Now, when we talk about technology layoffs, it's important to realize that these layoffs are not just related to basically tech companies like Facebook, LinkedIn, Microsoft, etc., which they're laying off too, every one of them. However, this also falls into sort of what we would call typically companies like Groupon, Uber, etc., the unicorn startups, where they're laying off too. So this tells you a lot of things, I think. And people have to realize, too, that companies such as, for example, Accenture, LinkedIn, even startups that have a lot of free money, for example, that was basically given to them with the expectation that the stock price will keep going up. And, of course, some other expectations as well. But that's another story for another day. But what I wanted to point out is typically these companies, they're not going to lay off people if they look out and they forecast 6 months ahead and see, oh, well, maybe it'll be, utilization will be only 50% for 6 months, but then in 6 months it'll go back up to 80. Well, they're not going to lay off a bunch of people based on that. They're thinking long term. We're talking 1 year plus. This is not an exercise companies are doing for a few months of slowness. In case a lot of people don't, a lot of people don't realize that this is going to be a prolonged event. This lockdown is orchestrated clearly as day. That's another story for another day. But it's important to realize that all the signals, all the signs, all the, messages that you see are clear as day that they're not going to stop this until probably 2025. This is when it's going to wind down. And you could verify this with the World Bank. They're the ones funding this. But anyways, I'm not here to complain about the World Bank. I'm here to prepare you to get ready for what is going to be a life-changing event for a lot of people. Folks that pissed away $100,000 on college in tech will realize really quickly that they're going to have to get creative in creating cash flows. Those cash flows will need to be everything from either Fiverr to Udemy over to creating ebooks, whatever it is. You're going to have to get really creative. And if you're over 50, you might as well just, retire early if you can and get out while you can, because things are going to get rough. And again, I'm not pulling this out of my butt. And if you go to certain websites, for example, when you start reading on Bloomberg that the expectations and demand will likely still basically change by percentages of 20 to 30% in the next year, this is a big number. This is, still going to 2021 at least. Also, too, these layoff numbers that you see, I don't even believe that's the actual numbers. I think a lot of times these numbers, they say they lay off 25%, but it's probably 30 or more. And the reason is because some of these layoffs they do in small, gradual, and I've been involved in these before with other companies, so I know sort of some of the strategy that they use, because it's better to lay off 1,000 people than 1,500, for example. And again, that's from a publicity perspective, but also too, it mitigates a lot of possibilities around, lawsuits and other things that HR and legal think about. But one of the things that people don't realize is that these job cuts, not just in tech, but other areas like the airline. So for example, if you're running an airline, you're not going to lay off, 12,000 people in 1 month. I mean, unless if you're confident that demand's gone. Okay. There's been orders given pretty much, by the powers that be that travel will not be picking up for at least the next few years. So again, if you're a consultant, if you're doing professional services, pre-sales, your job is going to just probably suck. I'm just going to be honest with you. And one that flew around the world 20 plus times probably, at least 10 or 12, I don't know exactly the mileage, but hundreds, of thousands of miles in 1 year. And then over the period of 20 years, I flew like on 3 different airlines, United and American, at least 700,000 each, almost 1 million on American, for example. But anyways, what I'm getting at here is that travel is going to be restricted. And as you notice, they're pushing vaccines, they're pushing all these restrictions. So what I'm here to do is we need to start thinking about, really, to be honest, if you haven't started thinking about bringing in cash flows, you're making a big mistake. You don't want to be dependent on one income in this world now. I don't care if you work if you work for the government, they're going to be the last to fall, but they're going to have to fall because the money's going to run out eventually. But that's years down the road. But with that said, if you're in the commercial sector, you're going to have some really big challenges. Now, so if you're Airbnb, if you are, for example, Zenefits or your companies such as Groupon, these companies have already been decimated. Even companies that you would think would be doing really well, like Uber Eats, for example, they're still not performing like the way you would think. And a lot of this is, again, because of what? Nobody can go out. No one can take a trip anywhere. The days of a business trip are pretty much over. And they're going to restructure things to the point where, getting on a plane to go to Europe from Boston is going to be an event. You're going to have to get to the airport early, get your COVID checks. They're going to restrict things to the point if they get the plans that they want, it is what it is. And I know it's hard to believe that, they're going to restrict things so much, but it's coming. It's clear as day. They're preparing for the Great Reset. That's some of the story so far. So Bloomberg, for example, mentions, according to COVID-19, the the tech industry has cut 40,000 jobs. Okay. If you believe that one, go to Mendocino County in California and have a stogie, because that's not even close. To be honest, when you look at IBM, Accenture, you look at, for example, just small layoffs from Microsoft, 10, 12,000, LinkedIn is 1,000, you name it. That's still small. 1,900 from Airbnb or Lyft, I think, whatever those numbers are. Those are small numbers, right? Compared to what IBM will likely announce. Again, we know that it's September 10th today. We can expect here the end of the quarter, end of the year for a lot of companies and the federal government as well. So you could expect more layoffs coming the first week of October or so, probably the last week of September as well, and then going on through the rest of the year. And plus, remember, we have November and December coming up. Those are traditionally slow in tech. A lot of companies, travel would slow down. You can't hold a training session anymore anywhere. But what I wanted to do was just, again, prepare folks to start thinking about cash flows. Now, on my site, for example, you go over to myfiresavings.com, the Tech Commanders, and the GCP Gurus. I have several sites. There's also a free ebook available, Creating Cash Flows, actually I called it a Side Hustles for Techies, is a book that's available sometimes for free. It's available for free now on techcommanders.com. So take advantage of that. I walk you through how to create cash flows from multiple sources. I have over 35, 36 different resources for cash flows coming in. And it's relatively straightforward to create, but it does take effort. It does take time. However, if you're in tech and you're wearing that ridiculous face mask going on the subway every day, that's if you're even allowed to go to the office and wearing that every day, you're going to really start thinking about that in the next year because, again, this doesn't appear to stop anytime soon. So with that said, I want everybody to be successful. I really do care because I don't think people realize the scale of this. I won't get into some of the inner workings that are obviously going on. I'm going to focus on tech, but I want to focus mainly on preparing you to get ready for the great reset. And it is coming. It's been announced. It's already been funded. It's just time. Over and out.